Okay, we are live. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this week's edition of Unity Hour. As always, we thank you for taking the time to join us and dedicating 60 minutes, of your day to your own personal and professional development. For those of you who are new to Unity Hour, my name is Katie, and I am on the community team here at the Mom Project. We're very excited about today's session, where we have invited two seasoned members of our incredible talent team to join us and answer your top questions related to all things career search. I'm thrilled to introduce Amy and Mandy, who have both been with the Mom Project since 2018 and serve as true allies and advocates for our incredible community when it comes to navigating the job search process with the Mom Project, working to advocate for you with our incredible company partners we work with, and pretty much everything in between. Both Amy and Mandy bring incredible insight and experience to this conversation, and we could not be more excited to have them join us today. Before we get into the session, we just want to say thanks to everyone who submitted questions ahead of time. We have bucketed all those awesome questions into 3 different themes that we'll be covering over the course of today's session. First is overall career search questions. The second bucket is resume and cover letter questions. And the third bucket is interviewing questions. We do have a fairly packed hour, so we're going to get through all of that. But if we do have time at the end, we will, as always, answer as many questions as we can from you guys that come up in real time throughout the conversation. So, as always, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we will try to get to as many questions as we can at the end of the hour. And then finally, if you have any feedback about this Unity Hour or any other Unity Hours, if you have a dream topic you would love to see us cover in one of these sessions or anything in between, please feel free to email us at community@themomproject. We check that inbox every day, so we'll read your feedback. But anyway, all right, so let's kick this off. Amy, Mandy, thank you both so much for joining us. And I guess before we get into the questions, I would love, Amy, if you want to start with just a quick intro about yourself and kind of the perspective that you're coming from.
Absolutely. Well, thank you a ton, Katie, for putting this all together. Unity Hour has been a great series, and it's such a blast to be a part of it. As you mentioned, I've been with Mom Project for almost 2 years now. All things told, I've been in the recruiting and staffing space for about 10 years. I started on the corporate side, have been more on, kind of the agency partner side, in the last few years and with Mom Project most recently. So, I've worked really hand in hand with hiring managers over the years in a lot of capacities. My partner is also an HR director. His company has used Mom Project to hire talent in the past. So have gotten, really honest feedback from him about, that experience. So, from my perspective, I really love to just help demystify job searching, figure out those points that, where, sometimes we're just not sure what that next step is, or where, we don't understand why certain things are happening, certain ways at, in different times. So I try to, really hear talent and hear hiring managers and help them, kind of come together as best we can. So thrilled to be a part of it. And thanks again to you, and certainly for the community for tuning in today.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. And Mandy, we'll go to you if you want to give a quick overview of you and where you're coming from.
Absolutely. First of all, Amy, I love that phrase, demystify the job search. That is I'm going to use that now. My name is Mandy. I have been with the Mom Project, like Katie said, for 2 years. Actually, next week is my 2-year mom-anniversary. So I'm so excited. And when Amy and I started, we started maybe a month apart. And there was, I think, 40,000 users on our platform at the time. And we have over 250,000 now, which is just crazy. And so I think I can speak on behalf of both of us that we're so excited. And this is so cool to be able to share our tips and tricks with you. My main focus is within the finance and accounting space. So I oversee a team of talent managers that focuses on finance and accounting, sales, and customer success or service roles. So if you fall within that space, I'm your girl. And then Amy focuses mostly on kind of marketing, design, creative. Am I missing anything
Digital, yeah, everything up and coming. If it's a new idea and you want to get it out there, like I'm all over it.
Yeah.
In addition to all the awesome stuff Mandy's team touches on and what my folks are into, we also work across tech, legal, operations, HR, administration, just about everything.
Yeah. So
we're thinking about it.
We're both super excited. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for us. I think Amy spoke to everything I feel the same way about.
Awesome. Well, thank you both again. And let's get into it. So kind of first theme of questions is general career search questions. And this one is a question that's coming up a lot given the current situation. Are companies hiring right now, and is right now a good time to begin a job search?
Yeah, so yes, companies are hiring. If you actually go on LinkedIn today, the number one trending article is, here are the companies that are hiring. So there's a big list of a ton of companies that are hiring right now. A lot of them fall within tech, kind of food and retail, and then e-learning. So basically any company that's trying to keep up with the demands of COVID. Here at the Mom Project, we've definitely seen an impact on the number of roles that we're working. But with that being said, we've seen an increase already, which is great. And we feel very optimistic about kind of where the job search is heading and the job market. So yes, companies are absolutely still hiring. Amy and I are both working on a plethora of roles right now. So yes, they are hiring. And secondly, is now a good time to start a job search? There's never a bad time to start a job search. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and we'll talk a little bit about that more. But as many of you know, there's a lot of prep that goes into a job search, whether that's just figuring out what roles you're interested in. Your resume, I know can be a doozy. Interviewing, there's so many things that are a part of your job search. And so as long as it's a good time for you, there's never really a bad time to start it. Doesn't necessarily mean you'll get a position overnight, but that groundwork that you lay is always going to be beneficial for you. So no, it is not a bad time to start a job search.
That's a really good point. Like any work you put in, like, is just going to help you in the long run. Whenever, maybe you start and lay off for a little bit and don't pursue, but you've already like started taking actions to make it that much easier to get back into it when you are ready. So that's really, really awesome. Are there any nuances that people should be aware of while job searching right now in the current environment?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, now more than ever, we're continuing to have, greater and greater conversations about, remote or partially remote roles and what that looks like. And you have organizations that perhaps didn't have, the infrastructure in the past to really support that. And they're navigating into that space. So as you look at people who are newly looking to hire remote folks, more and more, they're getting very interested in a person's digital presence. So making sure that, you spend a lot of time, not only with your LinkedIn, but like, quite frankly, like Google yourself, like throw your email address out there. What does that uncover? Did you have a blog 10 years ago that maybe should be set to private, or, some photos that are, were in a public group that maybe don't belong there anymore. Because what you put out there publicly, like whether you intend it to or not, like there's a footprint for that. So just to be aware of those types of things. So, LinkedIn obviously super key, but in addition to that, what do you have your name attached to, and how does that look if it sits next to your resume when somebody's, potentially considering you for their team.
Yeah. Never a bad time for an audit. I mean,
yeah.
I should have a list for this weekend, actually, now that you mentioned it. But yeah, that's really a good point. So moving on to the next question. What are the first 2 or 3 things someone should do to kick off their career search or when building a job search plan?
Yeah, I have a couple things. So it can be very overwhelming. First of all, a job search, there's a lot of different components of it. It can feel really overwhelming. And so I think it's important to first figure out, what do you want to do? This note kind of has two sides to it. Are you targeting specific companies and kind of working your way back from that? Or are you targeting specific roles that you want to be in and then doing research on the companies to see if you'd be interested? So I would start there and kind of figure out what your focus is going to be. Two, have your resume ready to go. We'll talk more about that in a bit, but resumes can be a lot of work. And so just make sure that that's kind of ready to go ahead of time. You can definitely make alterations to it depending on the role you're applying to, if you want to highlight certain things or projects, but have that ready to go. I lied, I have 4 things. 3, make a schedule. The job search can be so consuming. You feel like if you stop applying for roles, you're going to miss out on something. And it can be this kind of snowball, especially on LinkedIn, where you're just like continuously applying for roles. So make a schedule for yourself, write it down and stick to it, whether that's, Monday, Wednesday, Friday for an hour or 2 each day, or just on the weekends. Whatever works for you, make a schedule and stick to it, or it can really take up a lot of your time. And I promise you, you're not going to miss things. If you have notifications set up and searches kind of put in that of roles that you're looking for, you will see them. So definitely make a schedule. And 4th, I share this with a lot of my moms, is while you may be ready to return, your family may not. And so that's something to really think about when you start your job search plan is, make sure you are set up for success to start in a new position, because we know how much you do for your family. And so we want to make sure that you're set up in a position where all of a sudden you're not like, oh no, I don't know about childcare or schedules or anything like that. And so that's something really important to think about, kind of as you start your job search. Even if it's not a family, yourself, just make sure you're kind of ready to go. But those are kind of my top pointers.
Yeah, awesome. All very important. And I'm sure there could be like 7 more that you could rattle off as well.
Yeah.
So the next question, particularly right now, do you have any tips for best positioning yourself to show you fit into the gig economy or are a good candidate for flexible and remote jobs?
Totally. So to immediately steal from 2 of Mandy's most recent and brilliant points, first of all, knowing what you would like to offer, just in general, big picture, like what types of things are you targeting? And it may be that starts with some research, right? What kind of roles are available? If you're not familiar with gig economy or more flexible remote roles, seek out people that are in your network, your friends, old colleagues, what have you, that have maybe gone in that direction. Talk to them a little bit about where they have had challenges and successes, rather than just, kind of saying to myself, well, I can probably wing this, like talk to an expert. And by that, I mean somebody who's done the thing before. So outside of that, just like general tips that seem kind of like they'd be common sense, but they're you don't want to put the cart in front of the horse and scramble to get these things in place later. If you're going to be working from home, you need to have a dedicated space to do that. And we'll talk a little bit more later about, best practices when it comes to even being available to video interview, things that you want to look out for that. So really thinking through that physical space, also thinking through your actual time availability. Do you have 40 hours or more or less in a, let's say, standard workday, or are you looking to fill some of this time before and after hours? Those are good things to know. So as you're, and we'll talk about this more in the interviewing piece, but as you're navigating through seeking out flex factors, really going in with what would be optimal versus, what can you be flexible on? So just understanding from yourself, even not knowing what might be available, but just truly what you have to offer, that goes a long way so that you're not entirely having to feel your way through that on conversations with, with companies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or if you talk to mom project recruiters, we love to have those conversations.
Yeah.
I will say, like, I get a deep pleasure out of, starting conversations with talent and with parents and saying like, hey, what's up with you right now, and what are you available for? Understanding that what you need today when your kid is today days old is going to be a little bit different in a few weeks when they're that many days old.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a one and done, but just, again, putting those parameters around it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's all really, really good advice. Next question is, do you have any advice for those of us looking to re-enter the workforce right now after taking a break from the paid workforce, particularly those of us who have been caregiving for an extended period, 10 plus years? How can we position ourselves as a solid candidate when there's a lot of talent on the job market right now?
Yeah, so I just literally said this, but make sure that you and your family are ready for you to return. That can be a big thing. And I say that to a lot of women and they're like, oh, yeah, I need to figure that out. So make sure that you're setting yourself up for, success to start in a role. I already said that. Secondly, figure out what it is that you want to do. So I've worked with women who have gone back to the position that they were in previously, or skill set, kind of similar within the same field. I've also worked with others who have made career pivots. And so to not get overwhelmed in your search, really try to figure out what it is you want to hone in on as you re-enter. Third, lean on your network a ton. I think sometimes as women, we have a hard time asking for help or saying, this is what I want, this is what I need to do. And people love helping people find jobs. It's literally why Amy and I are recruiters. It's so satisfying to be a part of someone's success. And you would be shocked at the number of people within your circle that are willing to help you. And so just put it out there, let people know that you're looking, that you want to start having conversations with people, and you'll be really surprised at the amount of connections that will come up because of that. So yes, definitely lean on your network, and we're going to talk about networking and things that you can do for that a little bit later. But yeah, those would be some of my kind of big points. Oh, lastly, what was the second part of that question? How do you differentiate yourself?
Yeah, it was like a returner when there's just a lot of talent on the job search, on the job market right now.
Yeah. So once you figure out kind of what avenue you want to take your job search, figuring out how to position yourself as an expert in that field. What can you bring to the table to help support whatever client or role it is that you're applying for, regardless of if you've been in that position in the last 5 years or if it was over 10 years ago? What can you bring to the table to help them be successful? I think that's really important, and being really intentional and specific in how you can aid them in their success.
No, that's all really solid points. Yeah, and I mean, the interview process obviously is like 2 ways, but they want to know what you can bring to them. So, so very, very good point. Next question, is right now a good time to think about making a career pivot? And I know, Mandy, you talked about this a little bit, but if so, how can I best position myself for a role in a new industry? And should I expect to begin in an entry-level position if I am making a pivot?
Yeah. So I think, with any good plan, a fair way to answer the question is, okay, so, all things being equal, where are we today? And what is the end goal, right? So, kind of going back to that original thought of, whether you're re-entering or whether you're looking to make a shift, like, is it about a company? Is it about a type of, really just switching, to doing a similar function in a different industry? Is it about making, a pretty major shift in terms of focus? If you're looking to go from being a digital marketing manager to being an accountant, that's a little bit of a different thing than like, hey, I've been a graphic designer and I really want to go into, project management for creative teams. So kind of just getting a good handle on where am I right now? Where am I looking to go? And it may not be a one-stop move. It may be like, hey, I could consult or freelance in this area and build up skills. If you're looking to get into something that, if certifications are really typical, if you're really looking to get into project management, there's a ton of ways to get into that from a certification standpoint. If you're, digital and doing a lot of things, many platforms have a whole host of trainings that are going to help you become a subject matter expert in that space, whether or not you've necessarily been hands-on and executing it before. So again, before you go whole hog into, something that you're putting your time and your heart and your money into, I would really strongly recommend, again, go back to an expert. And by that, I mean somebody who's doing the thing. Because sometimes we have a perception of what a day in a life of a person or role might be like. And it turns out like all jobs have parts that are wonderful and all jobs have parts that are stressful. So if you can get a good sense of, where your skills map and have either people in your network or people you can reach out to who do those things, that certainly goes a long way, as well as, seeking out experts in other ways. Almost all industries have thought leaders, whether it's a communications professional or an executive in that company, whether it's, there are no shortage of industry blogs and associations for literally everything. So as you're really getting settled on what you want those focused targets to be, start to learn who those industry experts are, follow their thought leadership, and get up to speed on, those buzzwords, that jargon, the way that people talk. And that way, as you're considering things, it's much easier to already be speaking that language. Mm-hmm. So I think I may have shifted a little bit from the original source of the question, but those are the things that come to mind.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, research is key. Like you said, it might seem like it's the right move, but yeah, you should be 100% clear on that before. And yeah, as many people, and actually right now is a good time. Seems like, people are being generous with their time in terms of networking, having a quick chat, information interview, whatever you want to call it. So now could be, if you are considering like a pivot, now is a good time to
Well, and another way to look at it, and I'm coming from the standpoint of, I've lived in Chicago for the last, 10 plus years, and we have a really amazing culture of startup companies, of just intensely amazing up and coming, B2B software companies, places that maybe, and again, going back to marketing, maybe they don't have a full-fledged team of marketers. Maybe they need somebody who has a whole variety of skills they can bring in and help create a program, right? So it's not necessarily about quote unquote being good at one thing. Like there are so many needs for organizations that are coming up that you do need to wear a lot of hats, and over time you will help build a team, but in the short term, they're looking for somebody who can just kind of come in and help get their hands around things. So that's where, having a good sense of what you want to bring to the table and then being open to what steps that might look like to kind of grow into it can really go a long way.
Yeah, good insight there. Okay, so I know we kind of talked about just a little, but can we share any insights around networking right now, and should I reach out to recruiters or HR leads or anybody kind of that sits on that side of the house at a company?
Yeah, so we're in a really awesome and unique situation right now to be able to do virtual networking. I know for a lot of people, networking events can be difficult in terms of the schedules of them. Usually they're after work. It's not always easy to make them. They can also be kind of awkward sometimes. And so right now, there is a plethora of virtual networking opportunities for you guys to tap into. If you check out LinkedIn, there's so much there right now. A plug for the Mom Project, though, if you haven't already, please check out our rally program. It is so cool. I think Katie's going to send out the link to it. This is a opportunity for you to connect with another member of the Mom Project community that was hand selected for you to network with, to lean on, to just talk about whatever it is, whether that's your job search or being a working parent or whatever that may be. It's been a huge success so far. And so if you haven't already checked that out, please do. And there's just a lot of opportunity kind of across the internet right now for virtual networking opportunities that might be far easier for you in terms of time commitment to do now compared to in person. So absolutely tap into that. And is it okay to reach out to HR and recruiters? Yes. But again, I would be really intentional in what you're getting out of that communication, whether it's a specific job or if you want to simply set up a conversation to learn more about maybe what they do if you're interested in HR, or just learning more about the company. I know sometimes when I was in the job search, I had more success that way of kind of approaching it as I'd like to learn a bit more so than being like, I want to talk to you about this exact job. So there's different ways to approach it. And like Amy said, also lean on the people within your network who are in those positions to learn more about them. So it doesn't necessarily have to be HR or recruiting that helps teach you about a company or a position. It can just be someone who maybe works at that company or is in that position. So definitely great time to be networking. So if you're not already, definitely do so.
Awesome. Yeah, we dropped the Rally link into the chat. We just had one question, so I'll just say Rally we're going to be matching people with other members of the community on an ongoing basis. So if you've already signed up, filled out the application, we should be sending out our first round of matches starting today and through the weekend. And then we'll email everybody an update if you're not in this first round. We're going to be doing them like every single week. So stay tuned for updates there. We're working on it.
So cool.
Cool. Okay. One last question before we shift gears and go on to resumes and cover letters. Just anything else, our community can do to stand out in today's job market?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, this echoes back to a number of points that we've touched on already, but, one thing that is, very, very different now than it was, certainly when I started recruiting. And if you haven't, necessarily been active in a job search in the last, 4 or 5 years, is a big shift. We are in a very different digital world now where computers aren't necessarily at the apex of all communications, right? So we're shooting off emails through our iPhones, we're reading resumes on phones, versus printing them out and keeping them in a physical file. So, things that are very different now, certainly in more, and we'll get into more of the nitty gritty of it, in more traditional organizations, you may still have, kind of the cover letter and 1 to 2 page resume expectation, but in other organizations, applications are getting much slimmer. The content that they're looking for in a resume, they're really looking for people who can be concise and specific, and again, very targeted. So as you're looking at roles, it's very powerful to really narrow down in, again, what you're looking for in terms of whatever those parameters are, and helping as you're really, getting your information in front of organizations, whether it's a resume or through the application system or what have you, really making sure that information is super targeted to whatever those needs are. We'll go into, kind of how to get around that a little bit, but what helps a person stand out is just being really specific. versus I have so much information to share and read between the lines to find that one key kernel of knowledge that'll gonna, help us connect over this thing. So, more of a tweet, less of a blog.
I like that. Awesome. Okay, so moving on to resumes and cover letters. This is a big one, and I think it continues to be a pain point for pretty much everybody. I don't really care what you do. Resume is just kind of a pain point. So lots of questions here. But just to kick it off, what do I need to focus on within my resume? And any tools you'd recommend for building an impactful resume?
Yeah. So where do we start with resumes? They can be really fun. So I think, as Amy mentioned before, the most important thing to know about your resume or to focus on is being specific. Recruiters don't spend a plethora of time looking at resumes. I know that might be hard to hear, but it's true. And so you want to make sure that what you're putting on there is very specific to your search. If you have no idea where to start with your resume, if this is kind of brand new to you, another Mom Project plug, check out our new Resume Rev tool. It's so cool, and it helps you build a resume from scratch. It spits it out in this beautiful format that me and Amy, when we first saw them, we're like, this is so nice. It's formatted beautifully. It helps you kind of put the verbiage together and what you want to include on there. It also allows you to put a career pause on there for whatever reason, if you've had that. So if you don't know where to start, great tool to utilize on our platform. But again, I would just say, make sure that the information on there is precise. It's visibly easy to read. You don't need to go crazy with the formatting or anything. Just want to make sure that the information on there is relevant to what you're applying to. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, broad, but a good place to start.
Awesome. And I'm going to drop the link to Resume Rev in the chat in a second here for those who are looking for it. We also have something called the 5-day resume challenge, which is basically like a guided 5-day journey that will help you kind of, even before you get to the resume rev part of like building a resume, like get you thinking about what you actually should be putting in there. So I'll drop both of those links in the chat in a second here. Okay, next question. How should I address a career pause in my resume? Anything those of us who have been out of the paid workforce for 20 or more years should be thinking about, or less? I mean, there's obviously a spectrum of
Absolutely. Yeah. So I will take these two questions sort of separately. So, in terms of addressing a career pause in your resume, while, y'all don't see thousands of resumes, but we do. And I can assure you, most people will have some kind of a career pause in their life, probably more than once. Mm-hmm. It is more common than not. So I think that, if with all things when it comes to your search, being upfront and transparent about it without, let's say, necessarily oversharing. So if it is, a personal sabbatical during which you traveled and took some classes, that's fantastic. If it is a family leave of, one nature of another, wonderful. An example of where, maybe you're giving a little bit too much information. Let's say, you're caring for someone with an illness, they don't necessarily need to know the family obligation and what that person had and how it resolved and all that stuff. If it comes to an open conversation at a later date,
mm-hmm.
Be professional, but use your best judgment. But when it comes to how to present it on your resume, keeping it just simple and high level is best. It really should not take up more real estate than one line. So that's my best advice, is just sort of keep that simple. It's not something to be ashamed about. It's not something you need to prepare to defend. I think that just most people will understand and respect that. And if they don't, they're probably not the best place for be spending time. So that's my thought on that. And then when it comes to folks that are, returning, whether it's been, a relatively short amount of time, or whether it's, much more currently, I think that, regardless of the organization you're considering, it's really powerful to spend some time, not only on that that company's website, not only on their careers page, but really spend some time and look them up in the news. What's been going on with their headlines? What's making them tick right now? Most companies that we, that have a consumer presence have made some kind of a headline recently, either, being impacted in one way or another. So in order for you to really prepare yourself to get to know this organization and potentially become a part of it, before you're even having the conversations with the live people, what's going on in their communications and PR space, because that will really, really inform, maybe you're really interested in an organization, but maybe not now, or maybe they've actually gone a long way and they've got, a whole remote workforce in action, and that's a fantastic place to go. So just, giving yourself the courtesy of being really informed going into it, regardless of what that break might have looked like, is always going to be powerful.
Yep. I think that's really important. Next question for resumes. I have 20 plus years of experience. Should I include all of my professional experience on my resume, or just focus on the past 10 years? I don't want to see myself being aged out.
Yeah, so Amy and I are going to split this question, because finance and accounting is very different than all the things that Amy covers. So I would say, as long as your resume is staying within 1 to 2 pages, put all the experience you want, especially for finance and accounting roles. Showing your career progression only means that you're a better accountant, that you know more, or whatever your skill set is. That's just an example. It can also show really great career longevity. It can show, opportunities for advancement for you in certain roles. So absolutely, I don't believe that you should feel the need to hide any of your experience, especially if it's relevant to what you're applying to, as long as it doesn't become a novel. So I think Amy and I both kind of agreed that 2 pages is probably as long as you'd want to go. But in terms of years of experience, I think for the roles that at least I work on, that's totally okay. And Amy, I think, feels different.
Sorry. So I was agreeing with you and ready to talk, and here I am. So I've got kind of two thoughts on this. So I work both with candidates that have, let's say, roles that are really portfolio driven in their searches. So folks, whether design, UX, into communication, sometimes communication design, that, your portfolio is a huge part of what is being considered, not only the organizations you come from and the content of your roles, but also your visual or content presence, right? So I would say, one thing to really look out for, if you're showing samples of campaigns that are let's say more than 3 to 5 years old, and you're looking at an organization that considers themselves on the cutting edge of something, that's a really long time ago in that world. When it comes to your resume, similarly, if you have a portfolio driven, search, going over a page is really kind of excessive, because that's sort of the highlight reel before they, kind of click into the link to see this, fantastic digital thing that hopefully you've come together. And you have opportunities on your portfolio to maybe go into more detail. Not only are you showing projects, but you're demonstrating what you've done. Maybe you have a little bit of a longer form resume, maybe your LinkedIn's a little longer form, but typically, if a creative director is looking at, production or a designer resume, they're really just looking at that one page. On the other hand, if let's say you're in marketing or product or something of a more technical nature, that's where, and you don't have a portfolio perhaps, that's where having a little bit of a lengthier resume, having a little bit thicker content is totally acceptable and expected. But I would say make sure the longer back in your history a role goes, you're going to, again, be taking up a lot less real estate on your resume, and just make sure that those points absolutely tie back to the job. If you were an account executive, 15 years ago in a digital agency, like most people kind of know what that means. So maybe you don't need 10 bullets there. Maybe you need 1 or 2, and they're probably talking about your clients or like the coolest campaign you worked on. So you're really focusing, most of the attention and the detail in your summary, and, more so in whatever recent experience is most relevant. So I think it's more about where you're weighting the information and less about like the amazing history that, that once was.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. There's like a bit of nuance depending on the industry, but overall, I feel like.
Oh yeah, it's all in place. It's just a question of how you want to position it.
Yeah. Any other resume formatting rules that people should be aware of?
Like I said before, I think keeping in mind that people can and will be reading their resume on their phone, as they're traveling, is really powerful. Looking at your resume, not only on your device, but if you have other devices, share it with a friend and, see, does this kind of make sense? So that really will impact, your font choices. Again, how many words you really want to pack on that page. KPIs are really important, but if it's just like a cacophony of numbers, like that gets a little bit, so like looking at it in different spaces, where does your eye go? What really draws your attention, and just kind of, does that help you tell the story that, that helps show off what you're really amazing at?
Yeah. I think a couple of other things I typically notice, obviously you want things to be, like Amy said, like very easy to read. So try to make sure that your formatting is something that's appealing to look at, but not too all over the place. A few things you want to make clear off the bat: where you worked, your job title, and your dates of employment. And then making sure that the bullet points that you're including there doesn't need to be 20, can be 5. Make sure they're specific to the job, whether that's the one that you're applying to, and making sure that it kind of correlates, and just showing kind of that ROI of what you were doing and how you, again, provided that expertise in your role, and just making sure that it's, again, easy to read, that within 10 seconds we can kind of see your career history and see where you've been and what you've done. Summary kind of descriptions of what you've done are tricky, so we really recommend bullet points. It's the easiest to read, except for a summary up top if you do decide to do that. But those are kind of my things I'm always paying close attention to.
Awesome. Kind of related to that, from the recruiting side of things, how much time is actually spent reviewing a resume?
How much time, indeed. It seems like both a really long time and a really short time, because you can, once you sort of tune into resumes, if they're formatted well and they're really easy to consume, it's easy to find one to get excited about and then, just decide to spend more time with it. So just, totally echoing the points Mandy was making. I personally feel that a solid professional summary, and I'm talking like 3 to 4 sentences max, that's tailored back to the job or the organization. I mean, in a lot of ways, especially in your more concise kind of application culture, that in some ways sort of stands in place of where, a lot of organizations don't look for a traditional cover letter anymore. And that's such an amazing place to really kind of plant your flag and say, hey, I have X number of years of experience. I'm awesome at these 3 things. Like, hey, my last 3 clients were direct competitors of yours, or here's what I've done, previously, the tools I've used that make me awesome at, or here's some metrics around a campaign where we came in and, we totally nailed it. And these great things, kind of happened. And what happens there is, that piece will get read. And that's way more powerful than objective statement saying, sort of that typical generic, like, well, I would love to find an organization where I can work, collaboratively or independently and do great things and be awesome at it. Like, cool, like we all really want that, but like, tell me where you're coming from in terms of, again, what are you kind of bringing to the table? And when that's really tight and really well put together, it's really easy to then follow and say, hey, these were their last, kind of 3 roles, and here's the organizations they were at. And so what were they up to there? Okay, like, let me learn more about this cool campaign that they did in this place or this time. So it's kind of a way to hype up the rest of the information in your resume and get somebody really interested in what's going on. If you look at a resume and it's just visually, if it's kind of flat, if all the descriptions are just in like these long paragraph forms and you've got like weird columns and like your eyes bouncing around the page, like it's tough. And unfortunately, a poorly formatted resume makes it really, really tough to get excited about a very well qualified candidate, because it's that much harder to understand, where they're kind of coming in from.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, all good points. I know you touched on it a little bit, Amy, about like cover letters. A lot of people are moving away from it. I know at the Mom Project, when you've been on a roll with us, we just have you submit a why me in lieu of a full cover letter. But in the larger kind of world of applying for jobs, I mean, how important are cover letters right now? And should someone always submit one, even if it's like optional as part of the application?
Yeah. Man, Amy, I don't know about you, but I don't have the time to read cover letters. But if you do have to submit one, same advice as I would give for your resume. Make sure that it's relevant to the job that you're applying to. Love the piece of advice Amy shared about throwing something in about the company that you either read about or you noticed on their website that really stuck out to you. Pulling, 3 to 4, responsibilities you've had in the past that relate to this job, and just making it very straightforward. I think sometimes cover letters get mistaken as like a personal essay, and we don't want to go that way. We want to make sure that it's really relevant to your background, why you're interested, and what you can bring to the table, again, as kind of that subject matter expert. So if you do have to do a cover letter, I would focus on that. And what was the second part of that question? It was, are we doing cover letters?
Yeah, it was just like the importance, and if it's optional, if you should still submit it as part of the application.
If it's optional, I don't think it's necessary, as long as you're, Amy.
So sorry to jump in. So as we've been talking, I know you and I talked about this, in the last couple of days to sort of prep for it. And me, like, I am on team, like, as straightforward as possible. So if it can be an email, it can probably be a text, right? So backtracking on that, a couple of reasons or a couple of opportunities to really leverage a cover letter. If there's something specific that might, and I just to say this big picture, like, might be an objection to considering you for a candidacy. So let's say, for example, you're really excited about a role in Chicago, Illinois, and you currently live in, let's say, St. Louis, Missouri, but you happen to have just bought a house in Chicago, or you have an apartment rented, you have a date to start, and you're looking to fill in the blank with a role in that market. That would be an amazing thing to put in a cover letter, because all of a sudden you're not somebody who necessarily is looking for a relocation package or hasn't thought that thing through. Like, you're on a train and you just like somebody else to, you know, to help you roll with it. So when you have scenarios like that where there's something that could use more explanation out of what your resume offers, that's super powerful. Or let's say, you know, hypothetically, if you've gotten a really good referral and you're applying, you know, through an external ATS, and you want to make sure that the folks looking at your application are really aware that, you know about this role because of somebody who works internally, that can be a really great thing to know in more of a cover letter type, you know, thing. So it's really just a question of like, what are you communicating, and like, is that the vehicle for that communication?
I should have just let Amy take that question.
That just came to me like right now. So
all important and good insights, because it's very nuanced. There's a time and place for a lot of different things. So appreciate it. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm actually we could do resume questions all day long. But I'm gonna shift to shift to some interview questions just to make sure we get some really important ones answered before this session wraps. So the first question is, given the current state of affairs, it seems like most, if not all, interviews are taking place over Zoom or Google Hangouts via the phone. Any tips to stand out during a video interview, especially because a lot of people have never done one of those before?
Yeah, I'm not a big virtual person, and so doing like virtual meetings and one-on-ones during all this has been a really big transition. So I understand those of you who this is very new. The biggest piece of advice Amy and I both kind of feel about this is treat any virtual interview as if you were in the office with that person sitting across the table from them, in terms of how you would present yourself. So I would not wear my Mom Project t-shirt to an interview. I would put on whatever I would have worn in person. It's totally okay if you want to take notes or have things in front of you, just like you would at an interview. And also make sure that your background is professional. Literally, like, either of the backgrounds any of us have on this call would be appropriate for an interview. And something Amy brought up yesterday that I think is really important for those of you who don't live alone is to not have a door behind you that someone could enter into your interview with, whether that is a child, an animal, a roommate, a partner, whatever that may be. And make sure that they're aware that the interview is happening, that you need that dedicated 30 minutes to an hour for that call. Another thing, if you do live alone, which I do, and I have found that certain days I don't talk at all until my first call or meeting of the day. And so if you do have a virtual interview or a phone interview, maybe call someone beforehand, just kind of get the frogs out of your throat, get talking, make sure that your camera works and that it's set up in a good position, and just kind of get those jitters out of talking in a room by yourself. And going back to kind of my last point, if you can do it on a laptop, it makes it much easier to use your hands if you talk, to feel more comfortable, to not be worrying about holding a phone or anything like that. And if you do have to use your phone, try to find somewhere that you can set it on, so you're not having to do like a weird selfie situation the whole time, and then your arm gets tired and you're like it can get a little messy there. So those are some of my biggest things. Did I miss anything there, Amy? I think those were...
No, those are brilliant. And I mean, the other thing, you know, that I think is really, really crucial, like, no matter how many times you've interviewed over the phone and in person, video interviewing just feels different. It takes a different kind of energy. Like it gets distracting. Like, where are my eyes on the camera? Do I see myself? Like, what's going on? Like, what are they doing? I got a Slack. Oh my goodness. The way that you can get distracted on a video interview is different than real life, as I demonstrated earlier. So, ultimately, like, truly practicing, like, in this space with this lighting at this time of day, like, I've discovered things working from home in the last couple of months that I never would have known. Like, my downstairs neighbor seems to always vacuum at the same time on a Tuesday, and it's early. So, like, I just don't do meetings then, because I'm just like, okay, eventually she will be done.
Yeah.
But it's things like that where when you have quirks in the neighborhood, or even like around lunchtime, like there's just like a amazing amount of like dogs that are always barking. So when we had the windows open, like, not an amazing time to be on a video. So playing it out a couple of times, test running it, grab a buddy who's willing to play hiring manager, kind of with you. Maybe there's somebody who's thinking about job searching themselves. Maybe you could kind of pair up a little bit and run through different scenarios like that.
Yeah.
So if you notice, like, hey, before I started this today, like, it looked like I was in a cave before I turned the light on, and now the sun shifted. So I'm like, it's like heavenly. So just things to think about is, it may not be as foolproof as it seems until you really give it a try.
Yeah.
I love that. Kind of like, find a buddy who like also might.
Please find several buddies. Like, we all need it, right? Like, even people who aren't necessarily searching, like, let people in your network know that you're looking. Like, maybe you've got a friend who's a hiring manager, and while she or he may not be hiring for a role that would apply to you, like, they probably know what basic interview questions look like, and they may be really great people to bounce just general things off of. Like, hey, how does this sound? Sometimes when you're interviewing, and like, especially when you're going through a pivot, it's almost like, if you think about like kind of the rigors you go through if you're doing like stand-up comedy, for example, like, in a way, your interview pitch, there are things to be practiced. It's kind of like a bit, like, how does that come across? What's enough information, versus when have I gone so far into a topic that, like, I'm really losing my audience, right? So practicing things out, with other people, seeing their reactions can really help you know how to tell a really, solid story when you're getting those questions coming at you that maybe you hadn't thought through, but how you want to present what you've been up to.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to bundle two kind of similarly related questions. So we got, just in the submissions when people were RSVPing, we got a lot of questions about how to speak to a career pause during an interview, and like kind of parlaying off of that, how to answer situational questions in an interview if you've been out of the workforce for however many years.
Yeah, so in terms of addressing a career pause or anything, that is, like Amy mentioned, similar to your resume, totally a personal preference of how you'd like to relay that information. I personally don't feel that anyone should feel the need to hide why they stayed out of the workforce or made that career pause. So don't feel that you need to do that, but it's totally your preference of how you want to deliver that information or how much you want to share. Again, I think it's great to err on the side of caution of you don't want to share everything personal to you. But I think it's totally okay to acknowledge, yep, I decided to stay home to be with my family or care for a family member or myself. Doesn't necessarily always have to be other people, but yeah, I think it's completely okay to share whatever you feel comfortable doing so at the appropriate time if asked.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, if you're in a position where you're transitioning from having taken that break, back into the workforce, follow that up with what you've been doing to really prepare yourself to come back. have you started, taking, online classes? Have you started reading, blogs again? Have you dipped back into your network? Kind of help tie that back into, so this is what, this was a situation, this is kind of the current state of things, and I'm really ready to go back because these are the steps I've taken to get there. And that way, regardless of the scenario that you're coming out of, the outcome is, hey, I've really been thoughtful about this. I prepared myself, to Mandy's point, I prepared my family. Here are the steps I've kind of gone through. And again, not to go through great and lengthy detail, but to really take that answer and pivot that around and say, so therefore, I'm really pumped about this opportunity because here's how it helps get me to that next step that I'm recognizing. So I think that a solid answer also comes with, kind of steering that conversation back to the piece that is really most important, which is, hey, you have this really cool gig and I want to know about it. Because from there, so much of it is really just active listening. As we know, job descriptions only tell so much of the story. So, really figuring out from the, the next person you're talking to, what's on the table, what's being offered, and how, how well those things jive with what you're up to.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're at time here. We'll try to squeeze in one more question and then we'll wrap it up. But because this is important, I think, to our community. How can I ask questions about flexibility during an interview without raising any red flags to a potential employer?
Yeah. So again, I think obviously us here at the Mom Project are huge proponents of flexibility and making sure that you are getting what you need, but there is definitely an appropriate time of when to ask that during the interview process. And kind of the golden phrase you want to hear is, so what questions do you have for me? Definitely don't want to jump into a conversation with a client or a prospective employer immediately saying, so I need this, this, and this. But kind of caveat of that, don't hide it either. Those are really important to so many of us, those flex factors. And so one, make sure you're going into that conversation knowing what the must-haves are that you need, whether that's one day remote, whether that's that you need to leave at 4 o'clock every day, a specific benefit that you need of health insurance or anything. Make sure you know, what do I need and what can I be flexible on, no pun intended. So know that and use that kind of question portion of the interview to ask those questions or get clarification on that. Make sure though that it's not your first question. You want to make sure that the person you're talking to feels that you were listening and engaged and really interested in that position. So maybe use that time as like your second or third question to get into those flex factors that you might need. Also, if you do talk to one of the talent managers internally at the Mom Project about any positions with our clients, bounce that off of us. We're more than happy to talk to you about whatever flex factors you need. If you aren't sure if they're appropriate to ask or do clients even do that, we're a great resource to tap into. I have talked to many women about so many things that they need, which is awesome, and they've never been able to talk to a recruiter about that. So definitely lean on us if you get on a call with us to kind of chat that through, and together we can really come up with a solution of how to approach that, if it's appropriate, whatever you need. That's kind of what we're here to help you with. So
yeah. And just to dovetail on that, just really briefly, something that can be really helpful. Again, I love the timing Mandy threw out there. When you have that opportunity to ask questions, make sure you have a few specifically, again, geared toward the team, the job, the company, the opportunity, right? Because that's, if that's not there, the rest of it, isn't gonna to line up. So once you get to that point, a way to approach that is to say, maybe perhaps if it is around being a parent, like I'm a parent, do you guys have any current sort of benefits or opportunities for me to tap into, like what's kind of normal. Because you may find that there are tons of parents in the organization. There probably are. So it may be, very case by case. It may be that maybe they want to loop in the HR team at a certain point to make sure that things really align with, organizationally what's able to be offered. So sometimes a way to kind of step into it is just say, hey, like before you sort of give the long list of maybes and musts and could we's, just kind of finding out like what's typical already and what would you be willing to entertain. So many organizations are very willing to be flexible, but perhaps they really need someone, in another time on site for 3 solid weeks to get through orientation and onboarding and training and security clearance and all that jazz. And after week 3, like, hey, maybe you can have 2 days a week from home. So, sometimes it's about thinking about short-term, long-term, in terms of, preparedness for your family. Do you have some kind of help or coverage if needed during interview time? And also, during onboarding, when maybe it's tougher to offer flexibility, do you have a little bit of extra hands to cover those things that may just come up? Because sometimes, the very flexible schedule may come after a little bit of, being able to get to know you and test the waters and really, make sure that all the players, and all the stakeholders really get to know each other.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so we're a little bit over time here. Amy, Mandy, yeah,
We like to talk.
We should just like set these up for
we could do like another hour.
8 hours. But no, Amy, Mandy, thank you so much for sharing all of these awesome insights and kind of gems. For those of you who have burning questions that we didn't get to today, I know there were a couple in the chat we didn't get to, feel free to shoot them over to community@themomproject.com and we'll do our very best to get an answer to you within the next week or so. We're obviously here to help in any way we can, and stay tuned for more Unity hours. I think this format works particularly well just because it allows us to kind of dig into the job hunting process very specifically, and I know that's why a lot of you are here. So thank you all again. Thank you, Amy, Mandy, and everybody. Try to relax a little bit this weekend if you can.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie.